Hello everyone and welcome to Toon Runes, the show that goes over cartoons both old and new to give you guys the answers to questions you've always asked. And today we're going to be talking about and theorizing about White Pearl, who made her debut in Steven Universe's most recent episode, Legs from Here to Homeworld. And this should go without saying, but there will be spoilers from everything up to Legs from Here to Homeworld, as well as spoilers from things that happened in the episode. So if you haven't seen this episode yet, make sure to click off this video now to avoid those and come back once you've seen the episode. Before we start, I also wanted to remind everyone to hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any uploads from me. Today's featured fan art is by Lost Swiftpaw in the Discord server. If you have fan art that you'd like me to feature on the channel, you can send it to me on any of the linked social media sites below or in the community Discord. And now that we got all of that out of the way, it's time to move on to the rest of the video. Now, this video is going to be a two-parter. In this video, I'm going to explain White Pearl's past and why she's broken. In the second video on this subject, I'm going to talk about how White Diamond has mind control powers. But without further ado, let's jump right into this theory. Now, you don't need to be a theorist to notice that White Pearl in both her speech and physical pose is off-putting. She isn't even voiced by Dee Dee like all the other Pearls are, and she seems nearly unresponsive to everything around her. It's almost as if she's an empty husk of a gem and is being used as a puppet. And there's a lot of evidence for this, even going past the very obvious signs of mind control. However, let's first go on to the more obvious evidence so that we can go on to the more complicated stuff. The first bit of evidence that struck everyone about White Pearl being mind controlled was her voice.
Only Pink Diamond's presence is necessary.
As the show lore goes, gems of the same cut and class share the same voice actor. For example, all the Amethysts would share Michaela Dietz as a voice actress, all the Peridots would have Shelby Rabara, and by extension, all the Pearls would have Dee Dee Magno Hall. And this proves to be correct in most cases when looking at the Famethyst as well as the Diamond's Pearls. However, White Pearl breaks this rule. White Pearl's voice actress is credited as Christine Ebersole, who is also White Diamond's voice actress. Coupled by White Pearl's very still and never moving form, it really only seems like she's some sort of puppet being spoken through and manipulated by none other than White Diamond. Another interesting thing about White Pearl's appearance is that her right eye is cracked and missing. This seems to imply that her psyche is somehow broken and that she's damaged in some way. However, this is different in the way we usually see gems damaged or broken. We've seen corruption, cracked gems, and shattered gems. However, White Pearl's gem, which is on her navel, seems entirely fine. This seems to imply that it isn't the outside of her gem that is damaged, rather it's the inside of her gem. And by extension, her mind is what's damaged. Now, this is where things get interesting. Steven Universe is a show that contains foreshadowing, and boy howdy do we get a lot of it. In fact, we've seen this missing eye thing multiple times within the show. However, the most notable is one that happens back from season 1 in the episode Open Book. Now, this episode was kind of freaky from when it first aired, but now with this new episode airing, it brings a whole new meaning. When I first watched Legs from Here to Homeworld, I got a weird sense of deja vu. After rewatching the episode and discussing it with my YouTuber friends, I finally remembered who White Pearl reminds me of, and she reminds me of Connie, believe it or not. Specifically, the Cloud Connie from that episode. Now, before I get into how I think Cloud Connie represents White Pearl and what I think this means, let's look at her design and the similarities between her and White Pearl. Now, they're both supposedly missing an eye. Both of these characters are missing their right eye. Connie has an eye patch while White Pearl has a freaky cracked face. Wedding dress Cloud Connie also has puffs on the side of her head as White Pearl does, a very similar color palette, etc. In her outfit before the wedding dress, the colors were of a pink hue. Now, let's think about what happens in this episode, alongside thinking about how Pink Diamond interacted with Pearl back in Now We're Only Falling Apart. In an open book, Cloud Connie is created because Steven accidentally makes an order to the room by saying he wants to see Connie in her new outfit. This prompts the room to make a Cloud Connie who adheres to all of Steven's wants. Steven eventually finds this out, then tells Cloud Connie, "I don't want you to just do what I want." This causes Cloud Connie to break down and continue to repeat, "I want what you want, want, and continues on like this for a while like a broken record. In this instance, it almost seems like her mind has been broken because she's been given an impossible command that she cannot properly process. It's not what she was made for. She was made by the room to obey Steven and to make him happy. Now that we're through that, let's see how Pink Diamond interacts with our Pearl. We know that Pearls are made for higher ranking gems as servants, made to obey every order without any opposition. Pearl even states that she was given to Pink Diamond as a gift but failed to ever make her happy. This is because, like Steven, Pink Diamond didn't want a mindless drone as a companion. She wanted someone who was going to talk to her like she was a regular person and wanted someone who had a personality, which is something that Pearls don't really have. We can even see this in Pink Diamond's reactions when she asks Pearl certain questions and Pearl takes it literally and as a command. The best instance of this is when Pink Diamond says, "Can you imagine?" to Pearl. You can tell this isn't a command that she's actually making, and it's more of a question. Additionally, you can also tell this isn't something that she's enjoying or liking, and that she would prefer she actually have someone to talk to. And this makes sense now that we all know how the Diamonds reacted to her. Yellow and Blue treated her as a nuisance, while White Diamond was just completely dismissive towards her and her feelings. It makes sense for Pink Diamond to want companionship rather than someone who just always agrees with her and only does what she asks of her and nothing else. And this brings us to the biggest part of this theory. While I do believe White Pearl is being mind controlled by White Diamond, I don't think White Diamond is the one who caused Pearl's face and eye to break. I don't even think that White Pearl was actually White Diamond's pearl to begin with. She was originally Pink Diamond's pearl, and Pink Diamond was the one who broke her. As we can see back in Open Book, Cloud Connie breaks after Steven gives her an impossible command. She also breaks while in her pink attire. If Cloud Connie represents White Pearl, formerly known as Pink Pearl, this means that she broke while she was owned by Pink Diamond, not White Diamond. And as we've seen in the past, Steven has a lot of parallels to Pink Diamond since he technically is her. We later also see Cloud Connie in her wedding attire attacking Steven, then saying, "You told me not to do what you wanted." This may explain why White Pearl is being mind controlled, because it implies that she somehow started acting on her own and going against her commands. So instead of keeping her pearl, White Diamond and Pink Diamond swapped their pearls. Pink Pearl became White Pearl, and White Pearl became Pink Pearl, who is otherwise known as R Pearl. It's also possible that, like with R Pearl and how Pink Diamond silenced her, Pink Diamond accidentally gave White Pearl the command to be disobedient, which could explain Cloud Connie's erratic behavior. In order to counter this problem and make White Pearl usable again, White Diamond then fixed the disobedience by hijacking White Pearl's already fragmented and broken mind, using her as a husk. And the signs have been here all along for us, we're just now getting the final puzzle pieces. I've said since day one that I thought that Pearl had belonged to White Diamond, and it turns out that I was probably right. The forehead gem placement, her ability to use all the colors in her reformations, her mannerisms, her extensive knowledge on the gem species including White Diamond, etc. It all adds up to her being White Diamond's original pearl. White Pearl even has a navel gem placement which could match up with Pink Diamond's placement. This makes the mismatched gem placements on these pearls make sense. Pearl is also the one who tells Steven about White Diamond not being like the other diamonds and legs from here to Homeworld, implying that she has first-hand experience with her. All signs are pointing to this being what happened. So, if you got confused along the way, let me summarize for you in order. Pink Diamond originally owned White Pearl, who was formerly known as Pink Pearl. Pink Pearl was a regular pearl who obeyed orders, and it was meant for nothing else. Pink Diamond's want for companionship ultimately led for Pink making a command that Pink Pearl just didn't understand and could not follow. Alternatively, she made a command similar to the one that she made with R Pearl to prevent her from telling the truth about the faked shattering. This command broke her mind, causing the break on her face and in her eye to happen. And now Broken Pearl, who disobeys orders and who cannot work properly, is given to White Diamond, who overtakes the Pearl's mind to force her to work properly. In exchange, Pink Diamond is given White Pearl, who is an exceptionally experienced pearl whom White Diamond trusts to not be as easily breakable. That pearl is R Pearl. And of course, from here on out, the rest is history. I also wanted to mention super quickly that one of the reasons I thought of this theory was because of an upcoming episode name. Familiar is the name of an episode, but interestingly enough, Familiar is the name of a book series they're acting out in Open Book. Coincidental? I think not. Anyways, that being said, this is all just a theory. I could be right, I could be wrong, but I do think that this is one of my more solid predictions. But of course, I always like to open up the discussion to you guys. Do you think Pink Diamond was the one who damaged White Pearl, or do you think White Diamond damaged her? Make sure to comment your thoughts as well as participate in the poll in my community tab on my channel. And of course, if you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to see more from me. And I will see you all in the next video. Have an amazing day, guys.